Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Black Paradox, a synthwave retro-feeling rogue-like shoot 'em up. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Fantastico Studio, Black Paradox is currently available as a Steam Early Access title. So, Black Paradox is similar to other roguelike shoot 'em ups like Steriden, for example, but it does have some features and, well, an aesthetic that sets it apart. So as you can obviously see, its aesthetic is this neon 80s retro vibe. It's really cool. It's also got in the options a neat VHS effect, which I currently have turned off, but to show you it, I'll turn it on later throughout the course of the play. There's also some other features that do set it apart from Steriden, for example. Here you have a garage where we can actually make upgrades to our ship, which is the awesome DeLorean-looking Paradox. You start off with 2 chip slots, but you can expand that throughout the course of your play as you'll be earning money for all the enemies that you're defeating. You can go and buy chips. There are always a couple available on the black market, and those chips will include stats for your ship, as well as other benefits as well, like a repair, for example, shields, and a random chance of getting missiles. So it's a really neat upgrade system, and I'm curious to see how robust it becomes. One thing to, as I mentioned, is this is an early access title, so there are likely going to be several changes before all is said and done. That said, let's dive into the gameplay and see what we have. Another quick thing to note is you can play this game co-op, which is something that's really neat to go and see in a title that's so early in an early access release. Starting the game, we load up, and we drop into this awesome star field with planets in the background. So, Black Paradox is a standard horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up, at least as far as the base gameplay is concerned. We have the ability to move our ship around, and we can fire at the enemies. Rather than have 1-ups, we have a life bar, so up there in the top left. As we take damage, of course, we'll lose health, but some of the enemies will occasionally, although randomly, drop health pickups so we can revive ourselves that way. I do also have a health chip that I actually just purchased, so I'm curious to see how effective it is. That will slowly regenerate my health. So, like Steriden, throughout the course of the run, you'll come across enemies that will be carrying weapon pods. Once you defeat them, you can go and pick up those weapons, and you can equip 2 of those weapons at any given time. You can swap between them as well. So right now we have our base gun. Oh, there's our health pickup. And we have the laser, which is really effective at slicing through low life enemies. So the enemy waves themselves are procedurally generated random. And the documentation on the Steam page says that in the current build, there's 50 plus types of enemies and enemy patterns that you can see throughout the course of the run. That's really robust. So after you make your way through the stage, you will come to a boss, and right now there are 7 bosses. So the story of the game is we're the bounty hunter Black Paradox, seeking to take out the Hellraiser criminal organization. So Black Paradox, our awesome flying ship, car, starfighter, whatever you want to go and call it, is named such. And we also have an awesome ability, which we're actually named after the Black Paradox, which summons a time-traveled version of yourself to help you defeat the enemy. It's really effective at making short work of the bosses. Once a boss is defeated, you get the choice of 2 possible upgrades. Here we have extra choices, which would give us additional upgrades. More choice equals more power, or speed up and attack up. At least, no? I'm not sure if, like, speed, and, well, whatever AS is, we'll go with it. We'll go and increase our stats. Then once we defeat a stage, select our power-up, we get this awesome stage transition. So that's one thing I really love about this game is the aesthetic, specifically the designs of both our ship and the enemy ships. There's a really kind of post-apocalyptic style look. The enemies, their ships look like they're kind of right out of something, although maybe a bit more colorful, but right out of something like Mad Max, just in space. And that's not the kind of aesthetic you really see all that often. So to have something like that is really a treat. You also have some that do look a little bit more like pirate ships, in some cases very literally, and once again, that's something that's really neat to see. Ooh, the railgun. We're getting some great drops this time. So that's one thing. Since this is roguelite, you're not going to be encountering the same kind of weapons every time. The same kind of enemy waves, basically everything like that will be different. At present, there are 15 plus weapons in the game. I say plus because I've actually been adding additional weapons with upgrades. 15 plus power-ups, 10 different types of drones. The bosses, unfortunately, at this point are predetermined, so there are only just the 7 bosses in the 7 stages, and they'll always be in the same order. In fact, when we get to, well, rather, when we go and die, I'll be able to go and show that off. Here's our second boss, Shadow, the Space Cowboy. Let's go ahead and take a quick moment to turn on the VHS effect so we can see how it looks with that static and that filter in there. I like how clean the game looks without it, but there's a certain, really retro feel that adds, especially with this, neon Space Cowboy Shadow that we're fighting against. So although it's really powerful, I feel like I should go with the laser so I can just get more consistent shots in on this particular boss. And coincidentally enough, the Black Paradox ends up using the railgun, so boom, 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 Space Cowboy. So, cheat shells, explosive bullets, or HP increase? We're gonna go exploding bullets. Gotta go for broke. So that's basically what we have as far as Black Paradox. A couple of stages should give you a pretty good feel for how the game feels, at least as it is right now. So minus flavors, I feel like it can get overly chaotic too easily. One of the things that drives that is a lot of the enemy bullets will persist on the screen, and then as they move to the left part of the screen, they'll explode into other types of bullets, either shooting out in 4 directions or pinwheels or other effects. And my problem with that is it just happens too far to the left of the screen. Depending on how you're playing, by the point where the bullet goes and explodes into the other type of bullets it becomes, you've already forgotten it's there, and then you're surprised by it suddenly showing up with the additional bullets and the chaos that ensues. Not really a great combination for a game that can actually get quite difficult pretty quickly. So that weapon is the Hedgehog. It's actually a physical weapon, which is really short range. We'll go ahead and take a pass on that. So those bullets that were right there, the swirls, are a perfect example of what I was talking about. Then there are also certain situations where you get to have too many explosions going on the screen itself, and the screen shake can go and be a little bit of a problem. I wish you could turn off the explosion screen shake, but that's a problem I have with a lot of different shoot 'em ups. Since it is an early access title, you have balance tweaks still being applied to the game itself, and also the hitbox is basically the entire size of the car, which for a game that's almost a bullet hell is huge, almost too big. Well, not almost, it is too big. I'm used to playing games where your hitbox is mere pixels, so like was one of those things that actually took me a long time to realize what was causing me to have difficulty playing the game. Anyway, before we move on to the plus flavors, here when you die, you're taken to this game over screen with the 7 most wanted bosses, part of the Hellraiser criminal organization, and which ones you've defeated and which ones you haven't. You're also given a quick stat screen, and if you want, you can access the garage here, which is a feature that they added after, or that wasn't originally in the demo, but they added after feedback, which I feel is great. So here we could go and purchase additional chips if we wanted. That is an epic looking Dodge chip, but we don't have the money for it. This missile chip is pretty comparable to the one we have, so I think we're actually alright. So we'll just dive right back in, and I'll start talking a little bit about what I do really like about the game. And like I mentioned, the visual aesthetic, that red and purple neon, the design of the ships, I love it. Especially your own fighter car, flying car. I'm not even really sure what to go and call it. DeLorean? We'll just go with that. I mean, after all, there's time travel involved, so I feel that's appropriate enough. And then, as I was mentioning, the upgrade system. Since this is a roguelite, well, you do get reset after you lose a run. But having a shop like the garage makes it so that there's a persistence to what you're doing. And I really appreciate that, and I'm looking very forward to seeing what happens with the chip system. Ooh, the swarm gun. This is actually one of my personal favorites with all the runs that I've done so far. So there are a couple things that I would like to go and see as this game develops, and one of those is additional or different like bosses. Either like taking the bosses that currently are in the roster and maybe like shaking them up, or adding additional bosses and like selecting 7 from a pool of bosses. That could be really, really neat. And then a little bit more variety to the stage, as all we are is just fighting enemy waves in space, which isn't all that like uncommon, but that's the problem. It's not all that uncommon. So it'd be great to see something like some planetary or space stations where we're flying through, something to just add a little extra layer to the game itself. So that said, we have Black Paradox served up for your enjoyment. Especially if you're a fan of roguelikes, Steriden in particular, then I highly recommend you at least check out the demo for Black Paradox. Although I feel the demo is initially harder than the actual game starts out, so it's brutal until you get the hang of it. But there we have it. Black Paradox served up for your enjoyment. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.